I was counting. 1, 2, 3.
I was wiping the desktop. That was when the bomb was dropped.
It took about 45 seconds from the time the bomb left the airplane until it exploded. And I think there wasn't a man in the airplane that wasn't either timing it with his watch or counting or doing something. I was sure the bomb was a dud. I was sure it wasn't going to work.
After falling for 43 seconds, the time and barometric triggers started the firing mechanism. A uranium bullet fired down a barrel into a uranium target. Together, they started a nuclear chain reaction. Solid matter began to come apart, releasing untold quantities of energy.
Have you ever been in an argument about nuclear power? We have, and we found it frustrating and confusing, so let's try and get to grips with this topic. It all started in the 1940s. After the shock and horror of the war and the use of the atomic bomb, nuclear energy promised to be a peaceful spin-off of the new technology, helping the world get back on its feet. Everyone's imagination was running wild. Would electricity become free? Could nuclear power help settle the Antarctic? Would there be nuclear-powered cars, planes, or houses? It seemed that this was just a few years of hard work away. One thing was certain, the future was atomic. Just a few years later, there was a sort of atomic age hangover. As it turned out, nuclear power was very complicated and very expensive. Turning physics into engineering was easy on paper, but hard in real life. Also, private companies thought that nuclear power was much too risky as an investment. Most of them would much rather stick with gas, coal and oil. But there were many people who didn't just want to abandon the promise of the atomic age, an exciting new technology, the prospect of enormously cheap electricity, the prospect of being independent of oil and gas imports, and in some cases, a secret desire to possess atomic weapons provided a strong motivation to keep going. Nuclear power's finest hour finally came in the early 1970s when war in the Middle East caused oil prices to skyrocket worldwide. Now, commercial interest and investment picked up at a dazzling pace. more than half of all the nuclear reactors in the world were built between 1970 and 1985. But which type of reactor to build, given how many different types there were to choose from? A surprising underdog candidate won the day, the light water reactor. It wasn't very innovative, and it wasn't too popular with scientists, but it had some decisive advantages. It was there, it worked, and it wasn't terribly expensive. So, what does a light water reactor do? Well, the basic principle is shockingly simple. It heats up water using an artificial chain reaction. Nuclear fission releases several million times more energy than any chemical reaction could. Really heavy elements on the brink of stability, like uranium-235, get bombarded with neutrons. The neutron is absorbed, but the result is unstable. Most of the time, it immediately splits into fast-moving lighter elements, some additional free neutrons, and energy in the form of radiation. The radiation heats the surrounding water, while the neutrons repeat the process with other atoms, releasing more neutrons and radiation in a closely controlled chain reaction. Very different from the fast, destructive runaway reaction in an atomic bomb. In our light water reactor, a moderator is needed to control the neutron's energy. Simple, ordinary water does the job, which is very practical since water's used to drive the turbines anyway. The light water reactor became prevalent because it's simple and cheap. However, it's neither the safest, most efficient, nor technically elegant nuclear reactor. The renewed nuclear hype lasted barely a decade though. In 1979, the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in Pennsylvania barely escaped a catastrophe when its core melted. In 1986, the Chernobyl catastrophe directly threatened Central Europe with a radioactive cloud, and in 2011, the drawn-out Fukushima disaster sparked new discussions and concerns. While in the 1980s, 218 new nuclear power reactors went live, their number and nuclear's global share of electricity production has stagnated since the end of the 80s. So what's the situation today? Today, nuclear energy meets around 10% of the world's energy demand. There are about 439 nuclear reactors in 31 countries. About 70 new reactors are under construction in 2015, most of them in countries which are growing quickly. All in all, 160 new reactors are planned worldwide. Most nuclear reactors were built more than 25 years ago with pretty old technology. More than 80% are various types of light water reactor. Today, many countries are faced with a choice: the expensive replacement of the aging reactors, possibly with more efficient but less tested models, or a move away from nuclear power towards newer or older technology with different cost and environmental impacts. 3 reasons why we should continue using nuclear energy. 1. Nuclear energy saves lives. In 2013, a study conducted by NASA found that nuclear energy has prevented around 1.8 million deaths. Even if you include the death tolls from Chernobyl and Fukushima, nuclear energy ranks last in death per energy unit produced. While nuclear waste is really toxic, it's usually stored somewhere, while the toxic byproducts of fossil fuels are pumped into the air we breathe every day. So, just by reducing the amount of fossil fuels burned, countless cases of cancer or lung disease and accidents in coal mines have been avoided. If we can choose between lots of dangerous stuff being put into a deep hole and lots of dangerous stuff being pumped into the atmosphere, the former seems more logical. Nuclear energy feels way more dangerous though. Single catastrophic events burn into our memory, while coal and oil kill silently. It's like the death rate of flying versus driving. Even in the best-case scenario, it would take at least 40 years to switch to 100% renewable energy. So for as long as we continue using fossil fuels, nuclear energy will save way more lives than it destroys. 2. Nuclear energy reduces CO2 emissions. Nuclear energy is arguably way less harmful to the environment in terms of climate change than fossil fuels, our main source of energy. Since 1976, about 64 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions have not been pumped out thanks to nuclear energy. And by the mid-21st century, that could amount to an additional 80 to 240 gigatons. Humanity's energy consumption is rising steadily. According to US government projections, China alone will add the equivalent of a new 600 megawatt coal plant every 10 days for the next 10 years. China already burns 4 billion tons of coal each year. Coal is cheap, relatively abundant, and easy to get to. so it's not likely that humanity will stop using it soon. Nuclear energy might be the only way of dampening the effects of climate change and preventing a catastrophic man-made global warming. Compared to the other things we do, nuclear energy is relatively clean. So even if it is a good idea to quit nuclear energy long-term, it might be a good solution for the next 100 years or so, compared to the alternatives. 3. New technologies. Maybe technology will solve the problem of nuclear waste and dangerous power plants. The nuclear reactors we've used so far are mostly outdated technology because nuclear innovation stopped in the 1970s. There are models like the thorium reactor that could solve the problem altogether. Thorium is abundant, really hard to turn into nuclear weapons, and up to 2 orders of magnitude less wasteful than current nuclear reactors. The waste material might also be only dangerous for a few hundred years, in contrast to a couple of thousand years. 1 ton of thorium is estimated to provide the same amount of energy as 200 tons of uranium or 3.5 million tons of coal. So while we cannot know for sure if alternative nuclear technology will keep its promises, shouldn't we at least do more research before we forego an opportunity to solve lots of humanity's current problems? It might not be an easy challenge, but that hasn't stopped us before. So, should we use nuclear energy? There are risks involved in any great human endeavor, and we have to make an informed decision rather than rely on gut feeling. 3 reasons why we should stop using nuclear energy. 1. Nuclear weapons proliferation. Nuclear technology made a violent entrance onto the world stage. Just 1 year after the world's first ever nuclear test explosion in 1944, 2 large cities were destroyed by just 2 single bombs. After that, reactor technology slowly evolved as a means of generating electricity, but it's always been intimately connected with nuclear weapons technology. It's nearly impossible to develop nuclear weapons without access to reactor technology. In fact, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty serves the purpose of spreading nuclear reactor technology without spreading nuclear weapons with limited success. In 40 years, 5 countries have developed their own weapons with the help of reactor technology. The fact of the matter is that it can be very hard to distinguish a covert nuclear weapons program from the peaceful use of nuclear energy. In the 1970s, the big nuclear powers were happily selling peaceful technology to smaller countries, which then developed weapons of their own. The road to deadly nuclear weapons is always paved with peaceful reactors. 2. Nuclear waste and pollution. Spent nuclear fuel is not only radioactive, but also contains extremely poisonous chemical elements like plutonium. It loses its harmfulness only slowly over several tens of thousands of years. And there is also a process called reprocessing, which means the extraction of plutonium from spent nuclear fuel. It can be used for 2 purposes: to build nuclear weapons or to use it as new fuel. But hardly any of it is used as fuel because we don't have the right kind of reactors for that. A milligram will kill you, a few kilograms make an atomic bomb, and even an inconspicuous country like Germany literally has tons of the stuff just lying around because reprocessing sounded like a good idea decades ago. And where will all the waste go? After dumping it into the ocean was forbidden, we've tried to bury it, but we can't find a place where it will definitely stay secure for tens of thousands of years. Over 30 countries operate nearly 400 reactors, managing several hundred thousands of tons of nuclear waste, and only 1 is currently serious about opening a permanent civilian waste storage: tiny Finland. 3. Accidents and disasters. Over 60 years of nuclear power usage, there have been 7 major accidents in reactors or facilities dealing with nuclear waste. 3 of those were mostly contained, but 4 of them released significant amounts of radioactivity into the environment. In 1957, 1987 and 2011, large areas of land in Russia, Ukraine and Japan were rendered unfit for human habitation for decades to come. The number of deaths is highly disputed, but probably lies in the thousands. These disasters happened with nuclear reactors of very different types in very different countries and several decades apart. Looking at the numbers, we may as well ask ourselves, are 10% of the world's energy supply worth a devastating disaster every 30 years? Would 30% be worth another Fukushima or Chernobyl somewhere on Earth every 10 years? What area would have to be contaminated so we say no more? Where is the line? So, should we use nuclear energy? The risks may outweigh the benefits, and maybe we should stop looking into this direction and drop this technology for good.
जो भी ये काम करेगा उसे ना कोई ऑफिशियल पोस्ट मिलेगी, ना सैलरी, ना मेडल, नथिंग।
अमेरिका 1000 से भी ज्यादा एटम बॉम्ब्स टेस्ट कर चुका है। उसके नक्शे कदम पे चाइना 43 टेस्ट कर चुका है और एक के बाद एक अपने एटम बॉम्ब्स पाकिस्तान को सप्लाई कर रहा है। Now it's time for India to become a nuclear state. अमेरिका की लक्रो सैटेलाइट्स हर वक्त हम पर नजर रखे हुए हैं। कुछ नहीं बचता इनसे। मेरा प्लान है इन्हें पूरी तरह से अवॉइड करना।
हमारे मिशन का बेस होगा पोखरण फोर्ट और आप लोग आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया के ऑफिसर्स बन के जाएंगे।
हमें अगले 30 दिनों में यहाँ एक नहीं 6 न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब्स टेस्ट करने हैं, और वो भी दुनिया से छुप के।
Go, go, go!
शहर की भोली भाली जनता को पता भी नहीं कि इनके बीचों बीच क्या गुजर रहा है। अगर ये एक्सप्लोड हुआ तो ये पूरा शहर अंडरग्राउंड हो जाएगा।
Come on, let's move, guys!
तुम मुझसे क्या छुपा रहे हो अश्वथ?
Tell the president, let's stop this.
Why don't you get it? Our cover has been blown.
अमेरिका ने साफ शब्दों में धमकी दी है।
हम युद्ध नहीं चाहते और if push comes to shove, हम भी पीछे नहीं हटेंगे।
जल्दी! Tie up! Tie up!
हमने जो सोचा वो देश के लिए था, हमने जो किया वो देश के लिए है, और हमने जो पाया वो देश का होगा।
Today at 15:45 hours, India conducted 3 underground nuclear tests in the Pokhran Lake. I warmly congratulate the scientists and engineers who have carried out these successful tests.
If needed, it can be made in numbers. Okay? If it needed, can be made in numbers.
We've been following the Indian nuclear program for many years, but there's no getting around the fact that in this instance, we missed and did not predict the particular tests involved. Simply stated, we did not get it right. It's my responsibility to stand up and tell the American people that we didn't get it right.